Today we're going to talk about internet etiquette, and we'll go over a few guidelines on how to be a leader when you're on the internet. There are general communication guidelines that we follow. There are considerations we make before we say something to someone. Sometimes these are learned at home, sometimes at school, or other places in our community. We definitely speak different ways to our friends as opposed to our parents, to people at school, as opposed to people in our neighborhood. These are considerations and guidelines that we make based on the social rules that we are observing or maybe not observing. Where do you think you learn what to say and what not to say? Social media is a form of communication with guidelines as well. It might be more difficult to regulate what we say through social media because we are online and the exchange of conversation can be anonymous, or a delayed response can happen so that you don't really realize the consequences of what you're saying immediately. When we're in conversation with someone and we say something that shocks them or hurts them or surprises them or even makes them laugh, we can see that right away. When we're online, we say something, we post it, and we have to wait for the reaction. So sometimes we might not be able to regulate as instantly as we do when we're talking in person. These guidelines will help you make social media a positive place of communication. Let's lead the way to internet etiquette. For questions to ask before posting, liking, or commenting. Is it legal? That's your first question. Is it ethical? Is it acceptable? Is it decent? Asking these 4 questions will help you stay safe and keep your friends safe as well. Is it legal? This is by far the first thing that you should check. Every year, before the year begins, usually around December 30th, my kids and I will look at the new laws going into effect on January 1st for our area, for the state of California, and if there are any federal laws. We just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to stay up to date and that we're obeying the laws that are coming into play. For example, in 2022, there began a law in California that you can't throw out your food into regular garbage cans. That was a big one for us to consider. They're not going to start fining people for a couple of years, but getting into the practice of not throwing our food in a regular garbage can has been very, very difficult. Social media is no different. The state of California has some of the most prevalent state laws in regards to social media and the internet, especially in regards to privacy. So it's very important that before you use something like Instagram or Twitter, or even do internet searches through Google, you look at their terms of service and you check the laws for the state. Knowing state and federal laws related to social media and other electronic means of communication is very important. Students in high school can be charged with crimes as adults, depending upon their age and prior activities. Ensuring that you're aware of those laws is necessary as you move forward in life. The internet in general and social media specifically are a new frontier for the law community. So that means not just in the state of California, but federally speaking, more laws are going to start coming into play. New laws are introduced and either passed or rejected almost monthly. California is definitely no exception. So let's look at some of the laws in the state of California that might affect you. California has a stalking and harassment law that specifically points out electronic means of stalking and harassing, okay? Any person who willfully, maliciously, and repeatedly follows or willfully and maliciously harasses another person and who makes a credible threat with the intent to place that person in reasonable fear for his or her safety or the safety of their immediate family is guilty of the crime of stalking. Stalking is punishable by imprisonment in county jail or a fine of at least of $1,000 or less, or by both. These are serious punishment options if you willfully try to scare someone online. And especially when you're instant messaging someone, talking back and forth, things can escalate very quickly and you are in a position where you could be guilty of this. Threats via electronic communication. Every person who, with intent to annoy, telephones or makes contact by means of an electronic communication device with another and addresses to or about the other person any obscene language, or addresses to the other person any threat to inflict injury to the person or property of the person addressed or any member of his or her family, is guilty of a misdemeanor. Okay, so that's considered a threat. I have to speak often, more often than I'd like, to students about sending explicit pictures through social media or through messaging. It is not legal to do that, even if it has been requested. That is not legal for students under the age of 18. These are a little more business-oriented laws. Social media agencies and companies in the state of California have privacy guidelines. The laws protect the user more so than most other states. An employer in the state of California is not allowed to ask you for any of your social media usernames or passwords. They are not allowed to access your social media. They are not allowed to ask you to show them your social media. That is a privacy law that came into effect fairly recently to protect people and their private relationships online. Keep in mind that California is still an at-will employment state. So even if you say, I'm not going to show you my Facebook in a job interview, or I'm not going to show you my Instagram, or you can't see my Twitter feed, they can terminate you for other reasons. They can terminate you for failing to be open or honest. At-will employment is a very gray area employment guideline for private employers. False information. A person that operates a social media platform shall disclose whether or not that social media platform has a policy or mechanism in place to address the spread of misinformation with respect to, at a minimum, all of the following: reducing the spread of misinformation that contributes to the risk of imminent violence or physical harm, essentially instigating; reducing the spread of harmful, verifiably inauthentic content; practices intended to deceptively and substantially manipulate or disrupt the behavior of users on the social media platform. So anytime you see anything like this, social media companies in the state of California are supposed to take action upon misinformation, things that are posted on their platforms that are inherently not true. The next question you want to ask yourself, is it ethical? The laws of a society are very clear. They're written down. We just looked at them. They're cited. They're open to everyone to read. And even with that tremendous amount of clarity, laws are argued and negotiated upon constantly. I mean, lawyers and judges have careers because laws need to be discussed and made clearer than they are written through the courts. So imagine ethics. Ethics are even more complicated than laws. Ethics are the rights and wrongs determined by a group of people or a person. Ethics is a topic that if you stay in school long enough, you can take many different classes discussing, because it is very negotiable, it can be objective and then subjective in different ways. There might not be legal consequences to breaking a code of ethics. Consequences may come in the form of job loss or loss of friends or membership to certain organizations. So people do things that the whole of society find unacceptable, shocking, and it might not be illegal. They might not get arrested. They might not go to trial. They might just get fired or stop being famous for some. Ethics are a part of the building blocks we use to create social contracts. So whether or not you realize it, you enter into social contracts daily. A social contract is the implicit agreement among the members of a society to cooperate for social benefit, meaning that we all expect certain rights and that society will uphold those rights by taking ethical actions. For example, anytime I get into my car, start my car, and begin driving, I'm entering into a social contract that says I'm going to follow the laws of the road. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to be aware of who's around me so that I can keep everyone safe. And when I am driving, I'm expecting others to maintain that contract as well. If I roll up to a stop sign and it's a four-way stop, I expect the other people at the stop sign to stop as well. I expect us to negotiate who got there first, who has the right of way. These are expectations of a social contract in driving, but we do this every day. When you come to school and you walk through the threshold of a classroom, there's a social contract in place there. You need to make the agreement that you're going to sit down in the classroom and you're going to engage as a student. Your teacher enters into the social contract as a teacher. They are there to teach you, to convey knowledge, and to help you process the information and knowledge they're providing. These are social contracts. You do them with your friends, your family, your teachers. All over every day, we make social contracts, whether we're aware of it or not. So let's examine ethics on a broad level first. Think about and write down 3 rules that you live by. These can be rules you've given yourself because of laws, or just because you feel they help you do the right thing. We're going to go ahead and take 5 minutes to do that, and your teacher is going to go ahead and pause the video now. Hopefully you have your rules written down and you're able to share some of these rules with your class. When you share these rules with your class, why don't you also share what you expect in return from others because you follow these rules? Your teacher can pause the video now and you can share this. Okay, let's narrow the discussion down to the internet now that we have a bigger idea of what ethical means. What do you expect from others when you're online? I want you to go ahead and take about 5 minutes to think about that and write down your expectations as you scroll through social media or search for something. Now, with that in mind, what are 3 rules you have for yourself when you are online? Let's look at the film you watched in 4th period, The Social Dilemma. Do you feel your social contract with these providers is broken in any way because of unethical behavior? Explain why. Have you ever broken your own rules for life when you were online? Why or why not? Why would it be important to maintain a specific ethical social contract online? I'm going to go ahead and ask your teacher to pause the video now so that you can discuss these questions while you think of the answers. Keeping in mind that there are no right or wrong answers to these. These are all based on how your feelings, what you feel your place is in your life and society. The next question you need to ask yourself, is it acceptable? Comparing what we deem acceptable to what is ethical is very difficult. So many individual preferences and feelings go into what is acceptable. I'll give you an example from my own life. I'm an older person here, so I'm on Facebook. I'm not very Instagram savvy. I don't have very awesome selfies or pictures to take, but I am on Facebook and I have a news feed on Facebook. I expect that it's going to be relatively basic. I use social media to connect with family that's far away and friends that are far away. I expect to see the food they're eating, not that that's my first choice. Families, friends, I love to see my friends and their growing families. And I see that sprinkled into a flood of ads that are usually specifically tailored for me. I do have one friend who believes that showing shocking pictures and images of animal abuse will shake up people's news feeds and get their attention onto a topic that she's very passionate about. My friend believes this is the most ethical way for her to convey her work to help rescue animals in abusive situations. She really thinks that she's on a mission to do this. She's very passionate about it. And I personally find it unacceptable for my own peace of mind to see that on a social media stream. But it becomes a huge topic of discussion between our circle of friends. In this particular group, we all have varying degrees of what we find acceptable. So when she asks and I say, oh, it really, really bothers me, I have another friend who says, yeah, I get why you're trying to do it. I just scroll past it and ignore it. So acceptable is a very, very subjective, what we want to call gray area item for people, because we all have our own boundaries. What do you find acceptable on social media that others might not? How far is too far to get attention on social media? Can people be lawful and ethical but still be unacceptable to you? And how so? I'm going to ask your teacher to pause the video here, keeping these questions on the screen so that you might be able to write this down or discuss it in class. All right, let's expand those thoughts to more people outside your own personal boundaries. Are there things on the internet and social media that large groups of people might find unacceptable, but are lawful and ethical? What might those be? We're going to experiment with these ideas now. Here are 5 social media posts from various platforms. On a scale of 1 to 5, I want you to rate how accepting you are of the post. 1 is not accepting at all. It's really annoying to you. You think it's rude. You don't think it's appropriate. You don't want to see it. You don't care. Oversharing, complaining when there's no need to complain. And 5 being very accepting. I thought it was funny. I kind of enjoyed seeing it. I like reading about people's stuff. Share your score with your class, and then you're going to share the reason for the score if you're comfortable doing so. And remember, there are no right or wrong answers to these scorings. Here's the first post from Chase Bank. I'm going to ask your teacher to give you a minute to rate this, and pause the video now to discuss why you rated it the way you did. Here's post number 2. This is a post from Twitter. I'm going to ask your teacher to again pause the video so that you can rate it, and then have a short discussion on what you rated it and why. Post number 3. This is a two-way street. So this is someone complaining to Target and Target's response to that person. So again, I'm going to ask your teacher to pause the video, let you read through this, rate it, and then discuss your rating with the class. Post 4. This is a little bit of an interesting one. I want you to go ahead and have your teacher pause it, read it, give it your score, and then have a discussion on why you gave it that score. And post number 5. For the last time, the teacher can pause the video, have you rate this post, and then have a quick discussion on why you rated it the way you did. Hopefully through your discussion on the ratings of the posts, you can see how subjective acceptable can be. We all have our opinions, feelings, and boundaries, and those vary from person to person. It's important to consider that before posting on social media. You need to consider the fact that some of your friends are going to be very flexible, maybe not even read what you're posting, and other people are going to be highly sensitive to it. It really just depends on our experiences in life and the boundaries that we've set for ourselves, which is extremely personal, extremely individual. Okay, and considering that before posting, even when your account is private, is very important. I think we've all learned from our own situations, from celebrity drama, that screenshots can be lasting and the keystroke count is real. Hopefully you saw in the social dilemma that Google is counting your keystrokes and checking everything you type into there, even when you're in incognito. So the biggest thing you can do when you're wondering if what you're about to post is acceptable, what you're about to search is acceptable, is ask yourself, are you ready to have a conversation about what you are about to post? Because that's really at the end of the day, what you need to be able to do. Are you willing to say this to everybody? Because that's what you're doing even when your account is private. And are you ready to discuss what you're posting? And the last question that we would ask ourselves, is it decent? What is decency? So decency and being acceptable kind of run parallel to each other. Decency and ethics kind of come together as well. Were there any posts of the 5 examples that received high scores overall? Did your whole class or most of your class find any of those examples all acceptable? Is there a post or 2 that most of your classmates just almost all 5s? That's decency. Decency is behavior that conforms to accepted standards of morality or respectability. And this can be within a small group or even a larger group. What you might find acceptable, others might not, and vice versa. When a group of people find a behavior acceptable, it can be defined as decent. Review the following dialogue on a social media post. This is dialogue between a CNN reporter by the name of Don Lemon. He's fairly famous for older people, at least, maybe not for you guys, and Jonah Hill, who is an actor. He might be famous to you guys. He's in quite a few movies. I want you to go ahead and read this. And then we're going to ask ourselves some questions. What would be the decent thing to do for the person posting? What could Don Lemon do at this point to turn this around? What would be the decent thing to do for the person commenting or responding? What could Jonah Hill have written to make things a little bit more decent? Do you feel you can come up with 3 rules of decency for an internet society? Do you think decency is supported by laws, ethics, and what we accept? Explain your thoughts if you're comfortable doing so. So I'm going to ask your teacher to pause here so that you can think on these things and answer these questions. I'm going to go back to the conversation so that your teacher can pause here and you can have a minute to read. And now I'm going to go back to the questions so that you can look at the questions and answer them. So after all of these discussions and examinations of various posts online, how will you lead? By examining what is legal, ethical, acceptable, and decent, how can you help protect yourself and your friends? How can you set standards for your own online activity? How can you set boundaries for yourself with people closest to you and people you don't even know, like service providers? How can you help create general standards for your groups and friends online? I'm going to ask your teacher to pause here so that you guys can have a discussion about this. And if you want to answer these questions, these 4 questions on a Google Doc and share it with me at the following email address, we're going to randomly pick a winner from the Google Docs and give you a prize. And the winner will be announced during morning announcements on Monday. We have about 5 prizes to give away. So if you want to give me your answers, you will be entered to win a prize. I'm going to ask your teacher to pause now to have the discussion. Hopefully you've learned something today from this information. If at the very least you now know certain laws that you didn't know before in regards to what's legal online, that's a win. Hopefully you were able to think a little more deeply about what you do online, what other people do. Hopefully you realize that you do have a right to be uncomfortable. You do have a right to ask people to stop doing certain things. You even have a right to cut your own self off. You know, if you look at the conversation between Don Lemon and Jonah Hill, they stopped because at some point it's just not worth it anymore. And so hopefully you've realized that you have rights that you maybe didn't realize you had before. And hopefully you've realized that being decent, being acceptable, being ethical goes a long way in creating something positive and productive. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you were participating. Have a really good day.